Good evening. You're watching Arirang News at 8. It's Thursday, December 26th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Yoo Ji-hae. We begin this evening with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's controversial visit to a war shrine that honors the country's war dead. His surprise move has infuriated neighboring countries like Korea and China, prompting them to lodge strong complaints as they regard it as an attempt to justify Tokyo's wartime atrocities. Han Da-eun has our top story.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe marked the anniversary of his first year in office by visiting the Yasukuni War Shrine in Tokyo on Thursday morning. It's the first time a sitting prime minister has visited the controversial site since Junichiro Koizumi's visit in 2006. The Yasukuni Shrine honors 2.5 million Japanese war dead, including some convicted war criminals. Abe had previously steered clear of the shrine for fear of further damaging regional ties, choosing instead to send donations. But the possibility of a visit has always lingered due to the prime minister's strong nationalism and hawkish foreign policies. Abe told reporters on his way out that he was paying respects to those who sacrificed their lives for Japan and that he had no intention of upsetting the people of Korea or China. He added that he hoped to have a chance to explain his actions to the leaders of both neighboring countries. The trip is certain to worsen Japan's already soured relations with Korea and China, both of which were quick to respond. Korea's Culture Minister Yoo Ji-hae called Abe's behavior anachronistic.
The Korean government can't help but express deep regret and anger over Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit, defying concerns from neighboring countries. The Yasukuni Shrine harbors war criminals and eulogizes Japan's imperialism.
Yoo added Japan should acknowledge its past wrongdoing and build trust with its neighbors, starting with a sincere apology. Korean Vice Foreign Minister Kim Kyu-hyun summoned Takashi Kurai, the deputy chief of the Japanese embassy in Seoul, to relay Seoul's concerns. China's foreign ministry also condemned Abe's visit in a statement, while the U.S. expressed disappointment, saying it could escalate regional tensions. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
And foreign experts' take on Japanese Prime Minister Abe's controversial visit to the Yasukuni War Shrine and its possible impact on already sour ties between Korea and Japan. We go one-on-one with Carl Friedhoff, program officer at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies, who also wrote an article for the Wall Street Journal today about Abe's shrine visit. Thank you very much for joining us, Carl.
Thanks for having me back.
So what did you make of Abe's surprise move today?
Well, first it was unexpected, but it wasn't completely unexpected. I think Prime Minister Abe himself has said that he had been considering going for a while, and one of his aides, one of his close personal aides, had mentioned that he was probably going to, or was thinking about going, before the end of this year. I think that one of the things that's really going to happen is this obviously is going to set back Korea-Japan relations for who knows how long. And I think that's the really big consequence of this, is that for the region and for Korea-Japan relations and Japan-China relations, this is a major setback.
As we have seen from the report earlier, the Korean government has sternly denounced Abe's move, saying it will result in diplomatic repercussions. What sort of consequences are we talking about here?
Well, it's not exactly clear what Park Geun-hye can actually do. You know, she's already taken a very hard line towards Japan, you know, demanding that there first be an apology before any summit can take place. And on that, I think, you know, there might be less cooperation in some of the areas that they have been working on quietly. There has been some kind of military cooperation with some exercises that are not well publicized, and so Korea may begin to step back from those.
Well, there are strong opposition and regret being expressed here in the South Korean in the public. How will Abe's visit be received in his own country?
Well, I think the first thing to remember is what happened to the former Osaka mayor when he made some comments about the comfort women. And that was the fact that he was the leader of an up-and-coming political party, and in the next election, which was not long after that, his party was roundly defeated and he later left politics. So I think in Korea, when this comes out, you know, there's going to be a lot of attention paid to Abe going to Yasukuni, as there should be, but also the part where they have this very vocal minority reacting and in support of the Yasukuni visit. That's going to be the part that the Korean media focuses on, because there's this silent majority in Japan that actually does sort of oppose that, but they're not going to be the ones that speak up and get noticed. So I think there is going to be this kind of overall positive acceptance of the Yasukuni visit, but Korea is going to focus so much on that that they're going to kind of ignore that, well, there's a larger majority that actually might be opposed to it.
Good point there. Now, the last time you were here, you told us that Abe was slightly more popular than North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and clearly from today's visit, it stands to figure that his rating will further plummet. Now, with that being said, will this have any impact on President Park Geun-hye's policy toward Japan?
Well, I don't think it's going to have any real effect at all. I think she's already taken a very hardline stance, and she can't really get much clearer than demanding an apology for certain historical misdeeds. I think what it does do is that it relieves a lot of pressure, because with her hard line towards Japan, there's been a lot of private grumbling within the U.S. government that the problem is not Japan and its reluctance to atone for historical misdeeds. The problem is actually that South Korea is too inflexible. And so Park Geun-hye has been putting up with this pressure, not only from the U.S., but from a range of international observers. And so all along, she's been saying that, well, I'm not the problem, that Japan and Abe are the problem, and this has kind of vindicated her position. And so from that stance, I think it relieves a lot of the pressure that she's been feeling, and now she can sit back and watch the focus really go on Abe.
Well, China and the United States, of course, we cannot leave them out as well. They also expressed displeasure about Abe's visit today. What effect will this have on the geopolitical situation?
I think one of the most dangerous things that's going to happen, we're going to see a very dangerous rise in nationalism. This has already been going on within the three countries, within China, South Korea, and Japan, and now we're going to see that elevated even more. And of course, this also gives an opportunity to North Korea. I think there's not been much said on this yet, but North Korea, one of the games it likes to play is it going into negotiations, is that it likes to split parties. And so anytime that it has a chance to split Japan and South Korea, it's going to take the chance to do that. Now, how that effort is going to come out is not yet clear, but it certainly must be on their minds.
We will certainly keep an eye on that. Thank you very much, Correll, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And moving now to the country's railway strike that is now in its 18th day. There is a new development that could bring about an end to the conflict between the state-run railway operator Correll and the railway union. Kim Ji-yeon has the latest.
Correll CEO Choi Eun-hae and the railway union's deputy leader Park Tae-man sat for talks on Thursday. The meeting is the second since the railway declared an indefinite walkout on December 9th, the first one coming 13 days ago. During the talks, the railway union reportedly demanded that 5 changes be made to Correll. First, it requested the withdrawal of a plan to form a subsidiary that will manage New Korea train express routes departing from southern Seoul. The second is to halt the granting of operating licenses to corporations of the new operator. And if they are granted, the language should clearly state the move has nothing to do with the privatization of the railway. Other demands include the immediate end to police arrests and the prosecution of union members, and the formation of a committee under the Transport Ministry that would deal with issues relating to improving the management of the railway. An hour ahead of the meeting, Finance Minister Han Da-eun released a statement which said the continuation of the railway strike is taking a heavy toll on the economy. He added it will eventually drag down the nation's economic recovery, pointing to the railway operator's debts of nearly $17 billion.
The country's railways have been run by one entity without competition for the past 114 years, and this has led to it being poorly managed. We believe the competition among public entities could reduce fares and increase the quality of railway operations in the future.
Amid the talks, the rail strike continues. The state-run rail operator on its website said it would be hiring 660 new employees to mitigate the impact. Passenger train services are running at about 70% of normal levels, while freight train services have been reduced to around 30% of normal levels. Meanwhile, the union has called for a large-scale protest in Seoul on Saturday. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
The longest strike in the country's rail history is prompting experts to scrutinize the financial health of Correll, which has a monopoly on the country's rail system. Yoo Ji-hae explains why the government is taking such a tough stance.
The overhaul of Correll, the operator of Korea's railway monopoly, has emerged as a test case for the government's determination to rein in the lax management of debt-ridden state companies. That's because the state-run railroad operator saw its debt triple in the past 8 years to over $16 billion. Despite the piling debt, however, Correll has continued to pay out bonus payments and raised wages of its employees by more than 5% every year since 2005. The wage increases came during a period when the company was posting an average annual operating loss of $470 million. Critics say Correll symbolizes the inefficient and lax management that pushed the finances of state companies and other public organizations to dangerous levels. The government says it is determined to tackle the issue as it fears that the snowballing debts in public institutions have emerged as a serious risk to Korea's economy. Correll government officials say urgently needs to improve its efficiency and that a competition with a subsidiary will be the first step. But unionized workers, which is on a longest ever strike in the nation's railway history, is vehemently opposing the idea of setting up a subsidiary, calling it a scheme to eventually privatize the company. There's no sign when the railway strike will end, but how the conflict will be resolved will certainly set the course for future restructuring of the nation's public sector. Yoo Ji-hae, Arirang News.
At Korea's National Assembly, rival political parties are engaged in a last-minute push to pass next year's budget bill as well as a spy agency reform bill before the end of the year. Our National Assembly correspondent Kim Hyun-ji reports.
The National Assembly is operating with a new sense of urgency as it aims to pass a number of bills before the year's end. Some are approved on Thursday in a full assembly session, including a special bill aimed at giving more financial support to small-sized firms so they can grow bigger and more competitive. The ruling and opposition party leaders of a special parliamentary committee to reform the National Intelligence Service continued to hash out the details Thursday, one day after the rival parties agreed to pass the 2014 budget bill and a NIS reform plan this coming Monday. The Christmas Day deal, however, did not include an agreement on other key legislation. The Saenuri Party demanded the main opposition party help pass bills that seek to facilitate foreign investment and tourism in the country. President Park called for their passage earlier this month, saying they are necessary to revive the sluggish economy and provide momentum for a recovery. The Democratic Party, however, called for prohibiting efforts to privatize the state-run rail operator, Correll, asking that it be put into law. The 7,600-member railroad union has been striking for nearly 3 weeks in protest of the government setting up a subsidiary company that will run a new high-speed train line from southeast of Seoul to the southern port city of Busan. The railroad union says the move is part of the government's plan to eventually privatize national rail services. The government says it has no intention of doing so. While the rival parties failed to reach a consensus over these issues Wednesday, they are continuing discussions about the bills in the respective standing committees. As for next year's budget bill, the rival parties have cleared the way for about 2/3 of 120 government business projects that are pending, most of them pertaining to job creation and the creative economy. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
Now, prosecutors are demanding 4 years in prison for former head of the Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency Kim Yong-pan for obstructing a police investigation into allegations that the nation's intelligence agency meddled in last year's presidential election. At the Seoul Central District Court on Thursday, prosecutors requested 2 years on charges of violating election law and additional 2 years for abusing his authority. Kim was indicted in June for ordering his subordinates to reduce the scale of the special parliamentary probe into the NIS scandal. He'll be sentenced on February 6th.
Touch base with journalists, experts, and analysts who are taking the pulse of Asia's heartbeat.
South Korea's defense minister.
In a lively half hour, join Arirang's Yoo Ji-hae for the day's top stories, current affairs, business, technology trends, plus global weather forecasts and more. Arirang News. Every weeknight, live on Arirang TV.
Just 6 months ago, the Muslim Brotherhood controlled pretty much every aspect of Egypt's political system. Now that is all gone, and the interim government's designation of the Brotherhood as a terrorist organization looks to be the final nail in the Islamist movement's coffin. Our Shin Se-min reports.
In a move that'll give authorities much wider scope to crack down on the movement, Egypt's military-backed interim government on Wednesday declared the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist group. The country's deputy prime minister said the move will criminalize and ban the group's activities, including demonstrations. He also accused the Brotherhood of carrying out a suicide bombing on a police headquarters near Cairo that killed 16 people and injured at least 140. The declaration is one of the strongest statements the military-installed government has made against the Brotherhood. This statement has triggered a dramatic escalation in tensions between the authorities and the Brotherhood, which has waged protests on a near-daily basis since a military coup toppled the country's first democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi, in July. The Brotherhood says the government's declaration is based on false accusations, and it vowed to continue its protests in support of Morsi and the rest of the leadership who remain in jail. The interim government is pursuing a number of criminal cases against Morsi, including one for inciting deadly violence in December 2012. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And back here in the nation, Korean consumers remained confident in December, although they appear to have some doubts about certain aspects of the economy. The Bank of Korea said Thursday that its consumer sentiment index came in at 107 for December, unchanged for the previous month when it hit a 33-month high. The index is an indicator of consumers' outlook on the economy, with a reading above 100, meaning that optimists outnumber pessimists. The consumer seemed hesitant, however, when it came to the outlook for the next 6 months. That figure dropped 1 point from this November, that is, and the one measuring their general outlook for the economy in the future fell 2 points. The Korean government is set to move forward with its plans to realize a creative economy, one of President Park Geun-hye's key goals. While many are scratching heads about the effectiveness of the drive, our Oh Jun-ju tells us Korea should be able to expect some tangible results by the end of next year.
President Baek has been putting great emphasis on her vision for a creative economy since her inauguration in February, as part of efforts to create more jobs and new growth engines. Many people were skeptical about the plan in the beginning, saying it lacked substance. But it seems now that the nation will be able to start seeing some tangible results from the plan by the end of next year, as the Ministry of Science, ICT, and Future Planning is expected to give shape to plans first made in June. A major part of the plan involves setting up a research and development fund worth roughly $118 million to ensure that technologies developed by research institutions lead to businesses. The fund is expected to be in place until 2018. The Science Ministry also hopes to improve cooperation with the private sector. The government will set up a public-private council and bureau to seek specific projects on the creative economy and enhance regulations to foster new growth industries. The government is also expected to devise a plan for the broadcasting industry, the first in 14 years, to further develop the sector. The Korea Communications Commission and the Science Ministry will start discussing ways to ease regulations on broadcast media ads and unify regulations imposed on paid TV channels. The government has also increased its budget for science and technology development for next year by 2.2% compared to this year to $11 billion. The budget is expected to be spent on space launch vehicle development, lunar exploration technology, and the creation of venture firms based on newly developed technologies. But whether the government's 2014 budget proposal will pass the National Assembly and when still remains as a variable, with the opposition party demanding cuts in the budget for President Park's key pledges. Oh Jun-ju, Arirang News.
Now, books are a good barometer of what people think, want, and feel. And the most popular books can also tell us a lot about what's going on in society. Our Song Jae-san takes a look at which books were bestsellers in 2013.
What did you read this year? You might get all the information you need from the internet or your smartphone. But still, most people turn to trusty paperbacks.
I browsed through the bestsellers and I'm interested in books on the humanities. Today I picked up this book called One Thing, which helps you see what's important in life and focus on that one thing.
I buy 2 to 4 books every time I go to the bookstore, and I mostly look for books on different hobbies. I want to read more books on travel and hiking in the new year.
And the best-selling book this year was by a Buddhist monk whose tweets were read by those in need of advice or lessons on life.
Healing continues to be the key word for this year too, with people turning to books for consolation. Reflecting the trend, Venerable Heaven's mentoring essay, Things You Can Finally See When You Stop, has topped the bestsellers list for 2 consecutive years.
In the meantime, fiction made a comeback in 2013. Novels by foreign and domestic authors dominate top 5 of the best books of the year, with French psychiatrist François Lelord's Hector and the Search for Happiness and Korean literature legend Cho Jung-le's latest book, Great Jungle. But when you take a look at numbers 6 through 10, there are more practical books, including self-help books like Tong Fu and The Power of Habit. By age group, the number of books bought by people in their teens and 20s has continued to drop in recent years, while the amount bought by those in their 40s to 60s and over has risen.
The number of books bought by young readers drops every year, and they spend more time with their smartphones and other entertainment devices. What's also interesting to note here is that the baby boomer generation, people now in their 50s, are the best customers these days.
2 TOEIC test study guidebooks also made it onto the top 20, reflecting how much time and effort Koreans are putting in to improve their English. 송지선, Arirang News.
While temperatures have been rather mild for the end of December recently, we are expecting a cold snap soon. For details, let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, what can you tell us?
Well, Tia, it looks like tomorrow morning temperatures will drop 7 degrees compared to today. So I would say that Friday will be a pretty cold winter day. Taking a look at the current conditions, the nation is under the influence of a high pressure system, which is why we're seeing clear skies up north but cloudy ones down south. Now, it's not only the low temperatures, but also the cold, strong winds that may give us the winter chills, as a strong wind watch has been issued in Jeju and a cold wave watch in the Gyeonggi-do province. Other than that, the on and off snow showers that we're getting right now will continue through later tonight or early tomorrow morning. Looking ahead at tomorrow's readings, Seoul dips to -8 degrees in the morning with a high of -2. Meanwhile, Daegu and Gwangju reach 4 and 2 degrees respectively. As for other regions, Jeju starts off the day at 2 degrees before hitting 4 in the afternoon. All the while, Dokdo and Kumgang peak at 4 and -9 degrees respectively. Well, hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll see you back here after 10.
Thanks, Bo-kyung. And that's our broadcast on this Thursday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hae in Seoul. I'll be back with more news updates on our primetime news at 10 p.m. Korea time. See you then.